My mother said my military award should have belonged to my sister. She said it at a veterans recognition banquet, standing beside a white tablecloth with one hand on my sister's shoulder and the other wrapped around a glass of iced tea. The room had been clapping 5 seconds earlier. Then my mother raised her voice and said, "Before everyone celebrates Mara, somebody should say the truth. That award should be Karen's." The applause died in pieces. A fork touched a plate. A chair shifted. Somebody near the back whispered, "Oh my God." I was seated at the front table in my olive green army dress jacket, 54 years old, hair pinned low, hands resting calmly in my lap like I had not just been stripped open in front of a room full of veterans, spouses, chaplains, volunteers, and people who still believed military banquets were safe places for dignity. My father nodded from beside her. "Your sister stayed," he said. "You wore a uniform and left the rest of us to carry the family." My sister Karen lowered her eyes. Not in shame. In performance. The corner of her mouth moved before she corrected it, and I understood then that this had not been a sudden emotional outburst. It had been rehearsed, maybe not word for word, but in spirit. My mother had brought the wound. My father had brought the verdict. Karen had brought the face she wanted witnesses to remember. I looked at the three of them. Then I looked at the podium. Colonel Andrew Mercer stood there with a black folder in his hands. He had not opened it yet. Beside him, a framed certificate rested on a small easel. My name was printed across the top, but from where my family stood, I doubt they had bothered to read it. They had never been interested in the words under my name. Only what attention my name took from them. My mother tightened her grip on Karen's shoulder. "Karen was the one who took care of this family while Mara chased rank," she said. "Karen was the one who sat with me through surgeries. Karen was the one who kept holidays going. Karen was the one who sacrificed. If this room wants to honor a woman tonight, honor the one who stayed." My father said, "Amen." A few people looked down, because second-hand embarrassment is easier to manage than moral courage. Karen whispered, loud enough for my table to hear, "I never asked for credit." That was the cleanest lie of the evening. The banquet chair looked toward me, panicked. A younger captain near the wall took half a step forward, then stopped when Colonel Mercer lifted one hand. The colonel looked at me. Not with pity. With permission. I could speak. I could correct them. I could stand up in front of everyone and explain that the award had nothing to do with family holidays, childhood resentment, or my sister's talent for turning proximity into martyrdom. But 20 minutes earlier, before the doors opened, Colonel Mercer had said, "If your family challenges this, let me read the citation first." So I said nothing. I stayed seated. Because my mother thought silence meant guilt. My father thought silence meant shame. My sister thought silence meant she had finally taken something from me in public. They were all wrong. Sometimes silence is just the space before the record enters the room. Before I tell you what the colonel read from that citation, ask yourself this. If your own family stood up in public and said your life's honor belonged to someone else, would you defend yourself first, or would you let the truth be read aloud? My name is Mara Ellison. I was 54 years old that night, a retired sergeant first class in the United States Army, and for most of my life, my family had treated my service like a selfish hobby with better shoes. That is how they framed it. When I left home at 21, my mother said I was running from responsibility. When I deployed the first time, my father said I was choosing strangers over blood. When I missed Karen's second baby shower because I was overseas, Karen said, "Some of us don't get to play hero. Some of us have to live real life." Real life. That was one of their favorite phrases. Real life was birthdays, casseroles, church announcements, utility bills, holiday seating charts, who drove mom to the doctor, who picked up dad's prescriptions, who cleaned out the garage, who remembered which cousin was allergic to walnuts. My life, apparently, was not real. My life was convoys, medevac requests, supply corridors, Night shifts in field clinics, evacuation lists, blood inventory, casualty tracking, and the kind of paperwork that looks boring until somebody's son lives because the right unit received the right supplies before midnight. I served in medical logistics for most of my career. People hear that and think clipboard. They should. Clipboards save lives when they are attached to people who understand consequence. A missing blood cooler is not a clerical issue. A delayed oxygen shipment is not a clerical issue. A wrong route clearance can become a casualty report. I learned early that the body breaks in physical ways, but systems break people quietly before anyone notices. My job was to keep the system from breaking first. My family never understood that. Or maybe they understood enough to resent it. Karen was 2 years younger than me and had been the family's emotional weather system since childhood. If she cried, the house changed. If she was angry, everyone adjusted. If she failed, the explanation arrived before the consequence. I was the opposite. If I was tired, I was dramatic. If I was hurt, I was difficult. If I was successful, I was lucky the army gave me structure. If I set boundaries, I had forgotten where I came from. My mother built her identity around Karen staying close. Karen lived 10 minutes away. That was the crown she wore. Never mind that she came over mostly when she needed praise, money, sympathy, or an audience for how hard her life was. She was close. In my family, closeness beat competence every time. My father helped make that true. He liked clear roles. Man of the house, wife keeping peace, one daughter nearby, one daughter gone. The gone daughter could be praised at barbecues and blamed in private. It was a useful arrangement for him. He could say, "My daughter served," when strangers listened, then say, "You left your mother," when I refused to pay another one of Karen's emergencies. My award began years before the banquet, in a place my family would not have survived 1 hour of, though they had opinions about it for 20. It was during my last overseas deployment. I was 43 then, old enough to be called ma'am by soldiers who had not been born when I enlisted, young enough to still believe pain was something you could negotiate with if you stretched properly and kept moving. Our unit supported a field medical facility during a regional evacuation after a coordinated attack damaged several routes and overwhelmed local resources. I cannot tell you every location or every operational detail. Some things remain where they belong, but I can tell you this much. People were hurt. Too many. Too quickly. The first night, the lists did not match the faces. That is what I remember most. Not the noise, though there was noise. Not the blood, though there was blood. The lists. Names duplicated. Names missing. Transport categories changed without updates. Supplies routed to the wrong receiving point. 2 critical care patients marked stable because a tired clerk clicked the wrong code. A shipment of emergency fluids delayed because someone assumed another team had signed for it. War is chaos, people say. That is true. But the part that kills you is not always chaos. Sometimes it is a small administrative mistake, moving quietly inside chaos until nobody can see it anymore. I saw it. That was what I was trained to do. I grabbed 2 junior soldiers, a field nurse named Captain Albright, and a radio operator who looked 12 but had nerves like steel. We rebuilt the tracking board by hand because the digital system kept failing. We matched patients to transport. We rechecked supply manifests. We pulled 3 pallets from the wrong staging lane. We rerouted oxygen. We argued with a contractor who insisted he could not move without authorization until I told him, very calmly, that authorization was standing in front of him with a clipboard and no patients left. At 300, the evacuation order shifted. Non-essential personnel were to move back. I was told to leave. I did not. Not because I am noble. Because the board was still wrong. There were 14 patients unaccounted for between lists. 14 people can disappear in paperwork faster than anyone wants to believe. I stayed with Captain Albright and 2 others while the second movement wave loaded. We found 9 names within 20 minutes. 2 were duplicate entries. 1 had already been transported under the wrong spelling. 1 was in a temporary treatment area that had been misreported as cleared. The last one was a young specialist named Aaron Pike. He had been moved after a secondary structural collapse, treated, stabilized, then left off a transport update when the team leader went down with heat exhaustion. He was not abandoned by cruelty. He was nearly lost by exhaustion. That distinction matters if you are writing policy. It does not matter if you are his mother. We found him because a nurse remembered his tattoo. That is the kind of thing no citation captures properly. A tattoo. A tired nurse. A line on a board that bothered me enough to keep asking. By dawn, the last group moved. The medical supplies arrived where they needed to be. The board matched. The evacuation list closed. Nobody clapped. Nobody had time. Captain Albright leaned against a wall and cried for exactly 10 seconds before straightening up and asking for coffee. I went outside and threw up behind a vehicle. Then I went back in. Months later, my commander submitted the recommendation. I did not know the full language of it then. I knew there had been statements. I knew Captain Albright had written something. I knew Specialist Pike's mother had sent a letter that made me unable to speak for nearly an hour. I knew the award had been delayed, reviewed, misplaced, corrected, and delayed again because bureaucracy is the only battlefield that never demobilizes. By the time the recognition finally came through, I was retired. 54. A little slower on stairs. A little less patient with people who mistook volume for truth. A little more willing to let silence do its work. The invitation came from the Veterans Association, where Colonel Mercer served as board chair. He had been in the command structure years ago, not directly over me, but close enough to know the incident and the people attached to it. "Mara," he said when he called, "this is long overdue." I looked at the letter on my kitchen table. "Long overdue is still due," I said. He laughed. That laugh helped. I almost did not invite my family. I want to be honest about that. There are people who hear a story like this and think the obvious lesson is cut them off completely. Sometimes that is right. Sometimes distance saves you, but family conditioning does not vanish because you understand it. It lingers in the hand when you pick up the phone. So I invited them. My mother sounded pleased at first. "A banquet, how nice." Then, "Will Karen be invited?" "If you want to bring her, yes. You know, she has always felt left out of these army things." I closed my eyes. "These army things are my life, Mom." I know. I only mean it would be good for her to feel included." Feel included? At my award banquet. I said, "She can come as family." My mother said, "Good, she deserves that." That sentence should have been enough warning. My father's reaction was shorter. "What's this one for?" I said, "Medical evacuation support from years ago. The citation will explain." "You getting another medal?" "No, a delayed citation and recognition." He grunted. "Well, your mother wants to go." "Not I am proud." "Not congratulations." "Your mother wants to go." Karen texted me 2 days later. "Mom says you're finally getting your big night." I replied, "It is a recognition dinner." She sent, "Same thing." Then, what should I wear? I told her. Then I put my phone down and looked at the old framed photo on my bookshelf. Me at 32, standing outside a clinic tent, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back, eyes tired, smile real. I almost did not recognize her as myself, not because I looked different. Because I remembered how much she still hoped would change. The night of the banquet, I arrived early. I wore the olive jacket because the invitation said veterans were encouraged to wear service dress or equivalent. I kept the details simple. Clean lines, dark tie, small pins, nothing exaggerated, nothing I had not earned. The mirror in the restroom showed a woman no longer young. no longer trying to appear young, and no longer apologizing for the evidence of time. That felt like a promotion no one could print. The banquet hall was inside a veterans center with polished floors, folded flags in display cases, and framed photographs of local service members lining the walls. The tables had white cloths and small arrangements of red carnations. There was a podium at the front, a projector screen, and a missing microphone battery that caused 5 minutes of quiet chaos before a volunteer found replacements in a desk drawer. Normal things. Human things. I took my seat at the front table. Colonel Mercer greeted me with both hands around mine. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Good," he said. "That means it matters." My family arrived 15 minutes later. My mother wore navy. My father wore a gray suit. Karen wore cream. Cream. At a recognition banquet where I was being honored, my sister wore the color people wear when they want the room to notice purity. I saw my mother's corsage first, then the second corsage in Karen's hand. "For me?" I asked. Karen smiled. "Mom thought we should match." My mother stepped in quickly. "I thought it would look nice in pictures, the girls together." The girls. 54 and 52, and still the girls when my mother wanted to erase rank, age, and history. Karen pinned her corsage on her cream dress and looked toward the front table. "Are we sitting with you?" "Yes," I said. "Your family." She looked satisfied. During the first hour, everything stayed civil. People shook my hand. A retired medic told me he remembered the evacuation. A young woman from the ROTC program asked what medical logistics actually did, and when I told her, she said, "So you make sure help gets there before people know they need it." I liked her immediately. My father sat through that conversation without expression. My mother looked bored. Karen looked annoyed. The first speech was harmless. The banquet chair thanked sponsors, volunteers, families, veterans, and the kitchen staff in the wrong order but with genuine heart. Dinner was served. Chicken, green beans, potatoes, coffee too weak to insult anyone. Then Colonel Mercer stepped to the podium. He began by talking about delayed recognition. "Sometimes," he said, "the record takes years to catch up with the truth." That line settled over me. I did not look at my family. He spoke about medical support work, about invisible systems, about how courage often looks like staying at a table with a list when everyone else is running out of patience and time. Then he said my name. People clapped. I began to stand. My mother stood first. At first, I thought she was confused. She was not. She moved beside Karen, placed one hand on my sister's shoulder, and raised the other slightly. "Before this goes any further," she said, "I need to say something as Mara's mother." Colonel Mercer stopped. Every head turned. My heart did not race. It sank. There is a terrible calm that comes when the thing you feared finally stops pretending it is not coming. My mother smiled at the room. Not warmly. Bravely, she probably thought. "I know everyone here wants to honor Mara tonight, and of course we are glad she is safe and has had her career. But families serve too. And if this award is about sacrifice, then it should be said that Karen is the one who sacrificed for our family." Karen lowered her eyes. My father nodded. My mother continued. "When Mara left, Karen stayed. When I had surgery, Karen sat with me. When her father had appointments, Karen was nearby. When holidays came and went, Karen made sure there was still a family at the table. So before we put Mara on a pedestal again, I want people to know there was another woman carrying the burden." The room was silent now. My face felt hot. Not from shame. From the discipline required not to give them what they wanted. My father stood halfway, one hand on the table. "Her mother is right," he said. "Mara chose the uniform, Karen chose us." Karen looked up then. Her eyes were shining. She whispered, "I never wanted to compete." Another lie, softer than the first. My mother turned toward me. That award should be your sister. That was the sentence. That was the one they had carried in and waited to place at my feet. The banquet chair looked horrified. The ROTC girl stared at her plate. The retired medic's jaw tightened. Colonel Mercer stood perfectly still. I stayed seated. I looked at my mother, then at my father, then at Karen. I did not answer. Colonel Mercer closed his black folder. For one moment, I thought he was going to stop the ceremony. Instead, he stepped away from the podium and walked toward our table. The room followed him with their eyes. He stopped beside my mother. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, voice calm, "I understand family sacrifice is real." My mother looked relieved. That relief lasted 2 seconds. But this citation is not a family attendance award. It is an official military recognition for actions taken during a medical evacuation under operational threat. My father frowned. Karen's smile disappeared. Colonel Mercer turned toward the room. "I think the appropriate response is to read the citation in full." My mother said, "That isn't necessary." The colonel looked at her. "It is now." He returned to the podium. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I was proud of that. He opened the folder. The first page made a soft sound against the microphone. Sergeant First Class Mara Ellison distinguished herself by exceptional coordination, personal courage, and unwavering commitment to the preservation of life during emergency medical evacuation operations following a coordinated attack on Allied support routes. My mother sat down. Slowly, Colonel Mercer continued. "During a period of degraded communications, incomplete casualty tracking, and continuing threat conditions, Sergeant First Class Ellison identified critical discrepancies in patient accountability records and refused evacuation until all listed and unlisted personnel were reconciled." The room shifted. Not physically, morally. People were no longer watching a family argument. They were listening to a record. Her actions directly contributed to the timely evacuation of wounded personnel, the rerouting of emergency medical supplies, and the prevention of at least one unaccounted casualty being left behind during the final movement window. Karen stared at the table. The colonel read on. Witness statements describe Sergeant First Class Ellison as remaining at the coordination board for more than 18 continuous hours, moving repeatedly between triage, transport staging, and supply control while under physical exhaustion and operational stress. He paused. Not for drama. Because the next paragraph mattered. Captain Rebecca Albright, Field Nurse Supervisor, wrote, "She was the hinge holding the door open. When the system began to fail, she became the system. She carried others through the worst night of their lives and never once asked who would carry her afterward." Something inside me folded. Not collapsed. Folded, like a flag brought into proper shape. Colonel Mercer looked up briefly, then continued. Specialist Aaron Pike, whose evacuation status was corrected during the final review, wrote in a family statement, "My mother got me back because somebody refused to let my name disappear from a board. I do not know Sergeant Ellison personally, but I know I am alive because she kept asking where I was." The retired medic at the next table stood first. I heard his chair move. Then the ROTC girl stood. Then a woman near the back. Then another. Not everyone at once. That would have been too cinematic. It happened the way real respect happens. One person deciding. Then another. Then the room understanding what the right posture was. By the time Colonel Mercer finished the citation, nearly everyone in the banquet hall was standing. Everyone except my family. My mother sat frozen. My father stared at the floor. Karen looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The colonel closed the folder. "Sergeant First Class Mara Ellison," he said, "please come forward." For a second, my body did not move. Then the retired medic beside me said softly, "Go on." I stood. The room remained standing. Every step to the podium felt both too long and not long enough. I could feel my family behind me. I did not look back. Colonel Mercer handed me the framed citation. His voice dropped so only I could hear. "Long overdue." I nodded. He stepped back. The microphone waited. I had not planned to speak. My mother had planned to speak. My father had planned to approve. Karen had planned to receive sympathy. I had planned to survive the evening quietly. But the room was standing, and the citation was in my hands, and the old story had finally cracked open where everyone could see it. So I leaned toward the microphone. "I want to thank Colonel Mercer, the Veterans Association, and everyone who kept the record alive long enough for tonight." My voice was steadier than I felt. "I also want to say something about family." The room became very still. Behind me, I could feel my mother tense. I did not turn. My sister did help my mother after surgery. She did attend holidays I missed. She did live close when I lived far away. I paused. "That is true." Karen looked up. Maybe she thought I was saving her. I was not. But truth is not a weapon you get to hold by one end. The rest of it comes with it. A few people shifted. I continued. I did not leave because I loved my family less. I served because duty sometimes takes love where it cannot be seen from a kitchen table. My father's head lifted. I paid bills from bases they never visited. I handled records from time zones they never counted. I missed holidays and carried names and came home to be told absence was the same as abandonment. My mother covered her mouth. I looked at the citation. "This award does not belong to my sister. It does not belong to my family. It does not even belong only to me. It belongs to every person whose name stayed on that board because a team refused to let chaos erase them." My voice almost broke then. Almost. But tonight, I will accept it under my name because that is where the work was recorded. The room stayed silent for one breath. Then the applause came. Not loud at first. Then stronger. I stepped away from the podium before it could become too much. Karen stood as I returned to the table. She looked as if she wanted to leave and wanted to be seen not leaving. "Mara," she whispered. I placed the citation against my chair and looked at her. Not harshly, just clearly. "You let Mom say it." Her eyes filled. I didn't know she would say all of that. But you knew enough to smile. That landed. My father pushed back from the table. "Your mother was trying to honor Karen too." I turned to him. "By taking mine." His mouth opened. No answer came. My mother was crying now. Real tears, I think, but real tears do not automatically mean real remorse. She said, "I only wanted people to understand what Karen went through." I sat down slowly. "Then you should have told Karen's story without stealing mine." She flinched. For once, nobody told me I was being hard. The banquet continued because events do not know how to stop for one family's collapse. Dessert was served. Coffee refilled. People came by quietly, some with congratulations, some with apologies they did not owe me, but offered because decent people often apologize where guilty people refuse. Captain Albright called during dessert. Colonel Mercer must have texted her. I stepped into the hallway to answer. Her voice was older, rougher than I remembered, but unmistakable. Did they read the line? They read it. The hinge line. Yes. She exhaled. I meant every word. I leaned against the wall. For the first time that night, my eyes filled. "I know. You okay?" I looked through the open banquet doors at my mother crying into a napkin, my father sitting rigid, my sister staring at the table. "No," I said. "Good," Captain Albright said. "Honest answer." That made me laugh through the tears. She said, "Mara, Families sometimes think service is a room you walked into instead of a load you carried. Let them be wrong if they insist. I'm tired of letting them. Then don't. Simple. Not easy. Simple. When I returned to the table, my family had already gathered their things. My mother said she had a headache. Karen said she needed air. My father said nothing. At the entrance, Karen stopped beside me. I didn't ask her to say that. I looked at her. Did you ask her not to? Her face tightened. That's not fair. No, I said, it's precise. She stepped back. There it was again, the family fear of precision. They preferred feelings because feelings could be rearranged. Documents, citations, invoices, call logs, dates, names, those were harder to bend. My father touched my mother's elbow. They left without congratulating me. That hurt. I want to be truthful about that too. Even after everything, some small, stubborn part of me had thought maybe the citation would do what years of explaining had not. Maybe the room standing would make them stand inside themselves and say, we were wrong. But people who build their identity on someone else's guilt do not surrender easily. They retreat. They rename. They revise. For 2 weeks, my mother did not call. Then she sent a message. I hope you are happy with how that night turned out. I stared at it in my kitchen, the framed citation propped on the counter because I still had not decided where to hang it. I typed back. I am not happy. I am finished being edited. She did not respond. Karen posted a quote online about people who need applause to feel important. I did not reply. My father called once and left a voicemail. Your mother was emotional. She should not have said it like that, but you need to understand Karen has feelings too. I saved the voicemail. Old habits. Then I deleted it. New ones. 3 months later, I hung the citation in my hallway. Not in the living room, where guests would see it first. Not hidden in a closet either. In the hallway, between my bedroom and the kitchen. A place I would pass every morning. A place where the truth did not need an audience to remain true. Beside it, I placed a small photograph from that deployment. Not the worst night. A different day. A group of us outside the medical tent, dusty, exhausted, half smiling, because someone had found coffee strong enough to qualify as a weapon. I looked at the woman in that photograph for a long time. She was younger. Her back did not hurt as much. Her hair had no gray. She still thought if she did enough, explained enough, sent enough money, showed enough discipline, her family would eventually understand. I wanted to tell her they might not. I wanted to tell her to keep the receipts anyway. If this story sounds familiar to you, maybe you have been the one who left home and got blamed for leaving, even while you were carrying everyone from a distance. Maybe you have been the one whose money counted but presence was demanded, whose work mattered only when someone else could claim it, whose absence became a story other people decorated with resentment. Maybe your family had a Karen. Maybe your family made you the Karen. Maybe you were the one whose sacrifice could be photographed, while someone else's could only be documented. I have learned not to argue with every version of myself that lives in someone else's mouth. Some people need you selfish because it explains why they felt abandoned. Some people need you cold because it justifies what they took. Some people need your honor to be shared because they cannot stand that you earned something they cannot emotionally repossess. But records have a way of surviving moods. Citations survive jealousy. Dates survive speeches. Names survive family stories told badly on purpose. My mother said my award should have belonged to my sister. My father nodded. My sister smiled. I said nothing. Then the colonel read the citation. And when the room stood up, it was not because I had finally learned to defend myself loudly. It was because the truth had been standing all along. It only needed someone to read it aloud.